Hey, I'm James from Smokin' Dad Barbecue, and today we are doing a Dalstrong Chef head-to-head to help make sense of the Dalstrong product lineup. Because buying a knife on its own can be tricky enough. There's a ton of things to consider. The steel, country of origin, the manufacturing process, the hardness in terms of how durable that blade will be, the fit, finish, warranty, support, the handle, you name it, the list can go on and on. And there's a saying, I don't really love the saying, but the saying is the poor man pays twice. And I've definitely fallen victim for this and gotten my knife selection wrong a couple times. And now I have a couple knives that I bought, discarded, or given away I'm no longer using until I eventually found my forever knife. So to help you avoid any of the misfires that plagued me early on, I want to walk through the Dalstrong Chef knife lineup, explain some of the differences between each of the series, and see if it helps you find your perfect forever knife. Okay, so before we get into our flight of chef knives and the assortment that I have in front of me, I want to get down to brass tacks. Or in this case, I should say maybe Japanese steel or German steel tacks. And that's covering off the business end in full disclosure. So I've started off as a consumer of Dalstrong knives like this Shogun Chef knife in front of me, as well as several other Shogun knives. I am a consumer. This video is not sponsored by Dalstrong, but there's a lot of money tied up in knives in front of me, and I have not paid for all of them. To make this review possible so I can show you one of each series, Dalstrong has sent me some of the gaps that I didn't have. I am also in their ambassador program because I believe in the knives. I recommend them to my friends and family. And when I did this video, or a version of it a year ago, not with the complete series, my entire earnings for the year in all of 2001, getting up to about November, same time of year, was about 30 bucks. So I don't think that's influencing my opinion. This video is not sponsored in the sense that I'm being paid anything from Dalstrong. They're not giving me a script or anything I have to say or any talking points. This is all my own, but I want to be 100% transparent because it was one of those really distasteful things that I think was behind my misclicks in finding a knife that didn't live up to my expectations. So now that we've got that behind us and you know what is going on, without further ado, let's get into our flight of knives. So since this is a comparison about chef knives, I picked 8 inches as my standard size. Now, not every knife that I have is 8 inches, but when I put the specs and the pricing up on screen for comparison, I am using the 8-inch size. My personal preference for hand and being able to do multiple different types of cuts with a chef knife is to lean a little bit larger towards 10 and a quarter inches. But just so you know, when you see the prices, I'll be referring to 8-inch prices. So I'm going to start over here with the Dalstrong Gladiator series. This knife starts at $75, and we're going to work our way all the way up into the Omega at $160. So let's get it out of the Saya and show you what we're working with. So the Dalstrong Gladiator series represents some of the best value knives in the Dalstrong line. And all of them, or at least to my knowledge, are using a German steel end style blade, which means you're going to get a bit more of a bevel for a rock when you are cutting and slicing. So in addition to German steel, let me go through a couple other common features. The blade is angled between 16 and 18 degrees on each side. That's important. If you find, dual bevel knives, which means I can use this right-handed or, left-handed. If you have a single bevel, that will mean that the blade is angled on one side, which might be suitable for a right-handed person. So for example, if I was, carving off a fillet of salmon or turkey breast or something, that'd be great for me right-handed, and you would need the opposite bevel if you're left-handed. All the chef knives that I'm showing today are dual bevel, so I won't mention that every single time, but this is a 16 to 18 degree single bevel blade, which means that we are keeping that same angle all the way through. The handle for all of these is called a G10 Premium, which is a fiberglass handle, which has a really nice grip on it, and I'll go through some of the differences in the grip and the weighting because you'll see here a little bit of an oversized tang at the back. If you haven't heard that term before, the tang is the full sort of metal where it's crafted to end, and what that changes is the balance in terms of how it rocks and feels in your hand. So if I were to stand on the midpoint, I'm not going to do that because we'll tend to go flying, but this knife is weighted more heavily towards the handle, which means the blade itself feels nice, light, and airy, but it has some substance and cut power when we push down into it. So the last point to talk about on the Gladiator chef knife is its Rockwell rating. And so this is something that can be really confusing, at least it was for me early on, so I'm going to make the dangerous assumption and assume perhaps for you. So you'll see Rockwell ratings, which is a hardness. So a softer rating, like this one, this is the softest metal in the compound at 56 on the Rockwell rating, versus the Omega series here, we're going to get all the way up to 63. Every point between this 56 and 63 is worth about 10% extra hardness. So you could just do some quick math and say that the Omega series here is about 50% harder steel than the German steel compound that is on the Gladiator. So what does that mean? So this means this will be a little bit easier to sharpen, but at the same time it's not going to hold its edge as well. And so this Omega knife, I haven't even had to have it sharpened professionally. I have a whetstone, but it's still sharp over a year of using it regularly, whereas another Gladiator knife, not this one because it's brand new from Dalstrong, I found after a couple months that I am practicing on my whetstone, and that's actually a great knife to build your whetstone skills. A, because it costs less than half as much, but also because it is going to need sharpening a little bit more frequently. Let's move on to our next knife. Okay, this is the Centurion chef knife. So a step up in price. We're going from $75 up to $97 for the Centurion. And you'll notice the saya, we've gone from a plastic to a leather bound with a little clasp, which is a nice touch. Let's pull that off. And so similar for all the knives, we still have the premium G10 handle, although this one has a little bit different grip and feel to it, which I actually really like the handle on the Centurion series. I'm not personally a huge fan of the cutout. Maybe some of you more in the know can explain why that's there, what benefit is, but the weighting and the handle on these knives are really nice. So we have a much shorter tang, which again is just helping each knife be balanced. The handle is the same premium G10, so let's get into some of the differences. So starting with the Rockwell rating that we just finished off, this one gets a little bit harder. So we bump up to a 58. So this knife is about 20% harder than the Shogun that we just finished off at. And so that means we'll get a little bit more mileage in between sharpening. And I noticed this, I have a Centurion knife that I use to trim a brisket, and this is where you start to notice the hardening. On my first few knives that I got really soft knives, which are great. They're bendable, they're not going to break or chip, but that means for a task like trimming a brisket, for example, that the knife has lost its edge by the time you're not even halfway done in trimming a brisket. That means you need to stop, clean your knife, sanitize it, sharpen it, come back in order to be able to keep trimming. And so something at a 58 rating like what this is and the Centurion filleting knife that I have is, means you can get through that brisket and many briskets before you ever need to think about sharpening. So I personally not overly comfortable with the whetstone just yet, working on building that skill. So I love a knife that I don't need to be sharpening every single cook, or even worse, halfway between a cook. For the blade angle, we are 12 to 14 degrees. So hard to maybe explain that, but if we were to go with our Gladiator before, that might be the equivalent of having 2 quarters to give us a bit of our edge. The 12 to 14 degree range is going to be essentially equivalent to a single quarter, which is giving us that little bit tighter edge if we were sharpening it. So it's just a little bit more fine. And this one is the unique one in the crowd in terms of this is using Swiss steel versus German and Japanese steel for everything else. So that's a quick overview of the Centurion series. You gain a nice upgraded saya for the storage, as well as the handle feels more similar to the Shogun or even the Omega. So it's got a really nice grip, really nice weighting. The only thing, again, I'm not a huge fan of is the maybe more simple design of the blades. So there's nothing to help with if we're chopping veggies or slicing brisket or things like that to help the food not to stick to the blade, as well as this decorative feature and cutout. Again, I'm not sure what purpose it serves. Otherwise, this is a great package knife for the price, because this is, again, less than half the price of a Shun knife. Let's move on to my personal favorite, the Shogun series. Okay, so starting with the Shogun series, this is the first knife from Dalstrong that I bought, and I was drawn to it for a couple reasons. One, it's a Japanese steel, made incredibly well, and you've just got this beautiful 67-layer Damascus finish. Now, I picked this one out of the saya here, which is the new crimson red handle. You get a whole bunch of colors. It's on the website the same G10, but this does not feel the same, hang on, as the normal Shogun handle. So I don't know, I can get nice and close here, but you can see that this almost has what looks like a carbon fiber finish. So they're all fiberglass, but I love the handle on the Shogun series. And so when I saw that there was going to be the exact same thing with the only difference being color, I thought this would be a great addition, because I don't know if you can tell, but I kind of have a thing for red around the Smokin' Dad house. but I will say that this feels far more like a plastic handle, especially when it gets wet, a little bit more slippery than any of the other handles, and the feel just feels cheaper. So if you're between the color version of the Shogun series, same blade, and the non-colored, my strong advice would be to stick to the regular Shogun series, as this handle just feels every bit as premium as the knife looks and performs, and I'm a huge fan of it. So what else do we have on the Shogun series that makes it unique? So I mentioned already the fact that we are working with, you know, Japanese steel here, and it's only about 25 bucks more than the Centurion knife, but what we get is this lovely hammered finish, 67 layers of Damascus and Japanese steel, so it looks and feels absolutely beautiful. But we are now into the double bevel category, and so this is giving us a blade that has a little bit more multifunction purpose, and at the same time a little bit more difficulty sharpening for the amateur. So if you're not completely comfortable, you want to make sure you go to a knife sharpening service, or you use Dalstrong's own. They have a mail away service where you can get a safe bag, send it to them, and they'll send it back to you, you know, professionally sharpened. So the double bevel is the other unique feature, in addition to the materials. And I wish there was a better way, you know, to do this in terms of going out into stores. It's hard to find the full assortment of knives, but the feel in the hand, this knife is just like an extension of the arm and the body. And one of the reasons, and many reasons, that I absolutely fell in love the first time I used it and continue to use it now, nearly 2 years later. So that's the Shogun series, and I have many more in the Shogun series, from a cleaver to a slicing knife, and I'm going to get to those few extra knives that you might want in your quiver a little bit later on. But before we do that, let's move over to the Omega. Okay, so on to the Omega Kuritsu knife. So this is a multi-purpose chef knife. So this has a very unique liquid metal finish, is one of the things that separates it apart. You're either getting that hammered finish in the Shogun series, the liquid metal in Omega, to just a plain treatment on the Centurion or the Gladiator series. And so what this means when you're comparing sort of these knives, this is $160 going all the way down to our entry-level Gladiator at $75. This is one of the big difference makers, is how the food, or if we're slicing, you know, salmon or something like that, that sticks to our blade. And so these different finishes are helping food release as we slice, carve, or whatever it is that we're working at, and they make a big difference having used all four in multiple different types of cooks. Similarities to the Shogun, sticking again with the premium G10 handle. This has another really nice handle. Even though it's the same material, it somehow even feels wood. And it has a non-slip feel, so that we are working away. There's no lack of confidence in terms of having this incredibly sharp blade in and around your fingers and or loved ones' fingers. And speaking of sharpness, this is an extra point on the Rockwell rating. So the bevel stays the same as the Shogun series, but this moves up to a 63 plus Rockwell rating. So it's about 10% harder metal compound out of the United States versus the Japanese steel that we were using in the Shogun series. So I think there's a lot to love about this knife, especially again at the price. This is about $160 compared to our entry-level Gladiator at $75, but this still represents about a 20% discount to popular knives in the category, whether it be Global or Wusthof or Shun, and definitely one that I think you could check out. And feeling it in your hand, there's no wonder why it sits at the top of the Dalstrong Chef knife range. But you know, having owned both, I am perfectly happy with my Shogun series. So if you've got a loved one in mind who you want to show them, you absolutely love them, you could add this to the Christmas or holiday wish list, birthday wish list, or things like that. But the Shogun series is where the impressive knife kind of wow experience starts and doesn't go away. So whether or not you want to step up to something like the Omega series, I'd put that really down to a matter more of personal preference. What do you like the look of? Because the feel and the performance for me between these two is right on the money, and I'd put them neck and neck, tied for first place. So now that we've worked our way through the flight of Dalstrong Chef knives, there's two other knife categories that I'm a big fan of. If you're just starting off and looking to add to your wish list this year for some knives that would be absolutely handy on an everyday basis, I've added 2 extra ones. So the first one is absolutely essential, which is a boning or filleting knife. And so this is the Omega series here, so the same features that we just finished off with the Omega Chef knife. But having something that is, again, really small, agile, is an absolute lifesaver when it comes to either boning out a chicken or filleting, fish, or deboning that, to what I use it most regularly for, which is trimming my briskets. This is my go-to brisket trimming knife, and just like the Omega series, this has stayed incredibly sharp, and over a year later, I have not had this yet professionally sharpened, and I've gone through countless briskets, got to be almost 100, I would say, at this point, and it is still going strong. So getting a good filleting knife is definitely something that you'll want to add to your list. Sticking with the brisket theme is a slicer. So there's a couple of different slicers. I'm showing the brand new offset slicer, and so what that means is it's not meant to go with my offset smoker, but it's got this extra little lip here, which means we can hold it completely flat so that our fingers don't hit the table when we are slicing. And so I've only got a couple cooks on this, but I absolutely love it. It's still the Shogun series, so everything that I love about the handle, the fit, the feel, the finish, and the weight is there, but the extra little choice or utility is in terms of how we slice and carve. So if I was to have just one knife, it would be a chef knife. If I was to have 2 knives, it'd be the chef plus the fillet and boning knife. And if I could have 3, I would add the slicer. If you can't quite swing the 3, a good option, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, is to look at longer knives. And so this is the 10¼ inch chef knife. So it's not going to be as long as 12 inches here. But if you can see, you get pretty close in terms of the total length. And if in a pinch, depending on how often you do briskets, I wouldn't want to do this every day because you'd be a little bit short on being able to get a full slice and carve. But you can do a passable job. So if you only cook a brisket or 2 a year, or pork belly or ribs or other things that are really long, I would rather go for a long chef knife, and I could get by with just 2 versus needing to get a dedicated slicer for things like turkey, brisket, pork belly, ribs, or any other long cut of meat that you want to be able to carve and slice really nice for great presentation. One more thing. So a couple other things to check out for another reason that I love Dalstrong is the warranty, support, and overall customer experience. This is something that I had a hard time finding when I was looking at knives. And so Dalstrong does a couple industry best things here. Not only is it, free shipping, this includes if you're not happy. So 120 days later, you say, I don't like the knife, you can send it back with proof of purchase, and that includes the shipping. That's not an extra cost for you. I know I've been burned a couple times on things that say free shipping, but if you're not happy, you have a large bill to get it back to the company. They do an amazing job with their customer care. So whether it's chat, phone, support, web, email, they're incredibly responsive. Their head office is just about an hour from me. So they're incorporated in the United States, Canada, and worldwide. And they do an amazing job with their products and the value. And finally, price. And so in addition to being a great value versus competitors, like I'll put the pricing up on the screen versus, Global, Wusthof, or Shun, and many others, Dalstrong also as a thank you offers a save 10%. So I always have that link down below. You click it, automatically applies 10%. Helps you save 10%, and it does kick a little commission back to me to help keep doing these videos, which I really appreciate, but no pressure. You don't need to use that. That's it for today. I hope you really enjoyed hanging out, and this helped make sense of the Dalstrong Chef knife lineup. If you've got something else you'd like to see me do in the future, be sure to leave it in the comments below. That's it for today. Be sure to fire it up.